Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Pedone, and I am the founder of SalesBuzz.com. And today, I'm going to show you how to identify the real decision maker when selling by phone. Now, before we get started, I think it's essential for you to know that I've been successfully selling by phone for over 25 years now. And what that means to you is this: I know what it feels like to deal with call reluctance, rejection, selling during recessions, hitting quotas, bouncing back after missing quotas, and how to find motivation when the phone feels like it's a 25-pound weight and you just don't want to pick it up anymore. And today, I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes SDRs make when it comes to qualifying prospects on their role in the decision-making process. Now, first things first, if you're an SDR or a business development rep, your job is not to set appointments. It's to set appointments with qualified prospects. Huge difference in mentality and focus and your strategy when you look at it from that perspective. Part of the qualifying process is to identify the prospect's role in the decision-making process. Now, let's talk about identifying a prospect's role in the decision-making process for a second. Salespeople often think they can qualify a prospect's decision-making role based on their title. And this is a bad sales strategy, and here's why. One company might have let's just say CFO, for example. One company might have the CFO be the sole decision maker, and another company in the same type of industry, same employee type size, same annual revenue bracket, maybe even the same geographical location area, right? Everything might be matching, very similar companies, similar prospects, and yet that one company, CFO makes the sole decision, that's another company just like them, they might have multiple people that need to sign off or have signatures. Each company you contact is going to have their own unique purchasing process. Now, yes, you should know the top 2 or 3 titles of the people who are almost always involved in the decision-making process, so you at least know who you can reach out to and get the conversation started with. But assuming someone is a decision maker based on their title alone is a bad sales practice. Let me just give you another example. Have you ever assumed a prospect was a decision maker and you or your account executive goes through the entire sales process and gets to the close and asks for the order, and the prospect says what? I have to check with so-and-so. I got to check with my boss. I got to check with my supervisor, right? Don't you hate when that happens? And here's the problem. You have to understand something. Your prospect in that scenario, they are either telling the truth or they are lying. Either way, you are now in what I would call a negative sales situation, because if they really are telling the truth, but you try and handle it as it were an objection, you could jeopardize the relationship you've been building to this point. On the other hand, if they are lying and you do not try and handle that objection, you might not ever get them on the phone again. This is a common sales problem that happens when good salespeople use bad sales practices and do not properly identify their prospect's role in the decision-making process. So I'm going to show you how to avoid this scenario from happening to you in the future, but to do that, we first need to understand that it's a salesperson's job to identify, not assume, what the prospect's role is in the decision-making process. And to do that, you need to understand that every prospect you ever speak to will fit into one of 5 categories as it relates to their role in the decision-making process. And here's what they are. The first one is this. They're the decision maker, meaning they do not need to speak with anybody else or get anybody else's approval. That's really cut and dry, right? You're speaking to them, it's their decision, they can pull the trigger, and you're good to go. Next, they're part of the decision-making team. Now, what does that mean? What it means is this. It means they have a vote, you need and want their vote, but their vote alone does not get the deal done. So if you're speaking with somebody who has a vote, you need and want their vote, but their vote alone does not get the deal done, they're part of the decision-making team. Now, here's where everybody usually goes off the tracks and goes wrong. Number 3, they're an influencer. The difference between the influencer and somebody who's part of the decision-making team is the influencer does not have a vote. They have the ear of the decision maker or decision makers, but they do not have a vote. If your sales cycles, if you go back and look at your pipeline, right, after the session, I want you to go back, look at your pipeline, pull up some of the deals that you feel you should have closed already. They're taking longer than expected, and you had really good conversations, but they're just not moving forward. You keep following up with them, and you keep getting delays for whatever reason. I want you to make a list of those. In those scenarios, if you have deals that are taking longer than expected, a common area to look at is, are you really speaking to the decision maker, or are you speaking with an influencer who you thought was a decision maker? See, if you don't properly identify their role, and you assume they're a decision maker, or you think you've identified it properly, but you didn't, and you put them in a decision-making role category, but they're really not, your sales cycle is going to take longer. You might even lose the deal, because while you're messing around with somebody who doesn't have a vote, you get your competitors coming in, talking to the right people, and now they buy from them. Bad scenario. You don't want that to happen to you. All right? So when you learn how to properly identify your prospect's true role in the decision-making process, you will speed up and improve your closing ratio. All right, next, number 4 is this. They're an end user. An end user may sometimes even benefit the most from what your solution has to offer. However, they have no influence or voting power. And the last one is this, is an information gatherer. Now, information gatherers usually happen on warm inbound leads, and they almost can appear as or act as if they're a decision maker. So a lot of times an inbound lead, and get an influencer, they almost have a chip on their shoulder as if they're the decision maker. Am I right? They start asking for your best price, and then they go shop it, and you lose it to the lowest bid. That's because you didn't properly qualify them on their role, identify what their role was, and then run the right strategy from there to deal with an info gatherer because you assume they were a decision maker. So now the question is this. If those are the 5 roles, right? Decision maker, part of the decision-making team, influencer, end user, information gatherer. If those are the 5 roles, now the question is this. How do you identify their role? How do you properly identify your prospect's role now that you know what the 5 categories are? And the answer is this. To properly identify your prospect's true role in the decision-making process, you need to ask 2 very specific questions. Now, the first question, I'm assuming a lot of you are asking something very similar or maybe this exact question here, right? So the first question is, and it does not have to be, by the way, it does not have to be this exact question. Different variations will do, but here's the standard. You ready? Other than yourself, who else is involved in the decision-making process? Now, your prospect, when you ask a question like that, your prospect can only answer one of 2 ways. They will either say it's their decision, or they will say who else needs to be involved. They'll let you know of the other people that needs to be involved. Most prospects, however, are going to have a knee-jerk reaction when you ask this question, and it's going to say what? How do they answer now when you ask that question? They say it's their decision, right? And the salesperson will simply move forward thinking they have the decision maker on the phone. The trouble is, oftentimes when the salesperson finishes their presentation and goes for a close, the prospect comes back with, well, I have to run it by my boss, or I have to run it by my supervisor. And now the salesperson is stuck because he or she doesn't know if the prospect is lying or telling the truth, right? So it's that whole deer caught in the headlights. So to avoid this from happening, here's what you do. After you ask the prospect, other than yourself, who else is involved in the decision-making process, what you're going to do next is this. Once you get your answer, you are going to want to run what I call the fast-forward technique, okay? This is an excellent way to solve this. The fast-forward technique is going to, one, it's going to shorten your sales cycle because it's going to eliminate one of the most common stall objections prospects like to use, and it's going to set clear action steps in order to close a sale. So that's the first thing. So here's how it works, right? So you simply ask your prospect, other than yourself, who else is involved in the decision-making process on something like this? Prospect says, it's my decision. And you simply respond with this. Well, Mr. Prospect, assume for a moment that you end up liking what it is that we have to offer, and let's say you decide you want to move forward with it. What happens next? Where do we go from there? Prospect, once again, can only answer one of 2 ways. This is why I love this question, right? So let me just backtrack for a second here. You're at the point where you have to identify their role. You knew what title to start with, right, to get the conversation going. You got the conversation going. and now it's time to identify their true role in the decision-making process. You go, other than yourself, who else is involved in the decision-making process on something like this? They say, oh, it's my decision. You go, okay, well, assume for a moment then that you end up liking what it is we have to offer, and let's say you decide you want to move forward with it. You know, what happens next? Where do we go from there? They can only respond two ways. One, they can say, well, if I like it, I take it to my boss for final approval, which would expose them as not the real decision maker, even though a few seconds ago they just said it was their decision. You see how easy that is? See how non-confrontational that is too? But it lets you know you're really not speaking to the person. So you don't want to set that appointment just yet. Because then what's going to happen is you set that up, think it's a decision maker, your account exec goes through the process, find out it's not, and now you guys are having words. Okay? So the first way they could respond to the fast forward technique, they could say, well, if I like it, I take it to my boss for final approval. That's one way. They're not the real decision maker. Or two, they can respond with, well, if I like it, I tell purchasing to order it, or something to that effect, confirming they really are the decision maker and have the final say. By asking the prospect the other than yourself question, followed by the fast forward technique, you will quickly gain a more accurate picture of which role or category your prospect truly fits in as it relates to their role in the decision-making category. This way, you can avoid setting appointments with non-decision makers. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. I hope you found this helpful, this quick little tip here. And if you'd like to get more free weekly tips like this, simply visit SalesBuzz.com and sign up for our free on-demand class like this one. Or like I said, you can sign up for our weekly sales tip newsletter. I'm Michael Pedone, SalesBuzz.com. Have an awesome day.